Hello, I hope everyone is doing well and preparing hard and just trying their best to do well in this test. In this video, we're going to talk about the reading section. Now, the reading section is the biggest part of the entire test. It has 67 questions that are spread out over 3 sections, and the only topics covered in this part of the test is the reading comprehension and the sentence completion. Now, we'll talk about these two topics in much more detail later on, but before we do, let's talk about the overall reading section in general and the kind of strategies and the kind of mindset you're going to need in order to do well on this part of the test. Now, for many people, the reading is really the hardest part of the entire test because it appears vague. It appears that the College Board and the test is asking you to choose between answers that are equally likely. However, although the questions may appear vague and many times they may actually be vague, you have to remember that the answers are all in the test. The answers are there, okay? When you walk in May, or whenever you take it a second time, you have to convince yourself that the answers are there and that you're going to find them. Now, critical reading is active reading, and many people don't do a lot of active reading because active reading is actually really hard to do, really hard to successfully do. You need to think about what is being written and how to tie that information together. You have to consider the big picture and the small picture. So when you read the long passages on the reading comprehension part of the test, not only should you analyze each paragraph, but you should also analyze how these things fit together. So here's what I suggest you do. Right next to each paragraph on the reading comprehension, you write a 1 or 2 sentence summary that consists of the most important details. And then when you read the entire thing, you write a 3 to 4 sentence summary that summarizes the entire passage and doesn't leave out anything significant. Now, active reading is hard to do because you're thinking about the details and the big picture at the same time. And although it's hard to do, active reading is some of the most important type of reading that you can do because this is really how you understand things. And if you want to get better at active reading, I suggest that you go on Amazon and you look up a book called How to Read a Book by Mortimer J. Adler. This is a really important book. It's difficult, I'll be honest with you, but it can really help if you pay attention to it. And although many of you may not read this book in preparation for the SAT, the people that are going to read it, I applaud you because it's a very, very helpful book. Again, if you want to read critically, for the SAT at least, write a 1 to 2 sentence summary of each paragraph in the long passages that you read, and then a 3 to 4 sentence summary of the entire passage. So let's talk about reading comprehension. How do you do well in a reading comprehension? Well, what is the reading comprehension? The reading comprehension, I think all of you are very used to what it is because you've probably taken tests like the PSSAs, the Terra Novas, the benchmarks, and you're familiar and you're experienced with this type of reading. Here's how I suggest you approach the SAT reading section. The first thing you should do is you should read the italicized introduction. It's 3 to 4 sentences at most. Most of the time it's only 1 or 2 sentences, and it tells you what the passage is going to be about. And it saves you a lot of trouble because it already guides you in a direction. Read the first sentence or paragraph if you have to. And read the last sentences or paragraph if you have to. It'd probably be better if you read the last paragraph, but I know that most people don't read really fast, so if you're one of the people that doesn't read as fast as others, you should probably read the first and the last sentence only. That, along with the italicized introduction, will give you what I think is a really good idea of what the passage is about. And once you've read the italicized introduction, the first sentence and the last sentence, or if you want the first paragraph and the last paragraph, ask yourself what this is going to be about. And give yourself 20 seconds at most, and keep that in mind. Keep your prediction in mind, what you think it's going to be about. Now, how do we go about actually doing it? Now that we've read the italicized introduction, the first sentence, and the last sentence, and we've told ourselves what we think it's going to be about. The reading comprehension has vocabulary questions laced into it. It's not a vocabulary test, more than it is a comprehension test, but there are maybe 2 or 3 or just one sentence in the entire section that talks about vocabulary. For me, I find it really helpful to do the vocabulary questions first. They'll take the least amount of time and they'll give you time to focus on the hard stuff. The vocabulary question is going to tell you directly where to go. It's going to tell you in line 45 the word so-and-so means so-and-so. So it's going to save you time. And once you get the easy stuff out of the way, then you can focus on the hard stuff. This is really important. The meaning of a word on the SAT, or more specifically the reading comprehension section, is never the most common meaning. What do I mean by that? Imagine that we have the following question on the reading comprehension, and you've read the italicized introduction, you've read the first sentence, you've read the last sentence, you told yourself what this is going to be about, and then you decide to do the reading, you decide to do the vocabulary questions of the reading comprehension. This is a very common question that you may see. In line 87, the word ruin most nearly means, and if you remember what I said, you'll know that 99% of the time, the answer to this is not going to be the most common meaning of the word. So you'll see these answer choices: to destroy, ancient monument, or to spoil. Now, the most common meaning of the word ruin is to destroy. So right off the bat, you can cross that out. It probably will not be to destroy. And it leaves you ancient monuments and to spoil, and you'll have 2 other answer choices. That increases your likelihood of getting it right by 20% because you've already crossed out one answer. You can do the passages in any order that you like. Please remember this for the entire test, not just for this section. You don't have to go in the order that the questions come up. You can skip questions, you can even skip entire sections. And I really recommend that you do that. You shouldn't feel guilty about it. It is recommended that you do the passages that interest you first and the boring ones later. Because if you think about it, at the beginning of a section or at the beginning of the test itself, that's when you have the most energy and the most enthusiasm. Now I know it's not a lot of energy and enthusiasm, but it's more. Read the italicized introduction to determine if it will interest you, and you can read the first and the last sentence of the entire passage. Once you know that this will interest you, then go ahead and do the vocabulary questions first. A really, really important point is the following. Do not add to the text and do not subtract from the text. Read it exactly as it is and read it carefully. I know the SAT is a timed exam, okay? And I know that you don't have a lot of time, but you cannot afford to read fast, especially on this section. More than any other section, you have to read slow, because if you read fast, you may take something away from the text or you may add something to the text. And this is just going to be a careless mistake. So one example of this. If the text says that Australian kangaroos can survive for weeks without food, pay attention to what it's saying. It's saying Australian kangaroos can survive for weeks without food. Sounds like a passage that you probably get. This does not mean that marsupials can survive weeks without eating. These 2 things, they sound very similar. Kangaroos are marsupials and food is related to eating. But saying that Australian kangaroos can survive for weeks without food is not the same thing as saying that marsupials can survive weeks without eating. Now, that's maybe a bit of an extreme example as to how people can change the passage because they misread it, they read it too fast. But don't do this. Don't fall into this trap. On the reading section of the test, read the question slowly. Read the passages carefully. If there's a citation question, and there's going to be many citation questions, and what I mean by a citation question is it simply tells you, go to this section, go to this line number. It doesn't tell you go, it just tells you at line number or in line number. you should go directly to the location of the question in the passage. Okay? Read the two sentences before it and the two sentences after it. This will save you a lot of time. So if you remember from the last question, if it said in line 87, what I would do is I would read from lines 85 to lines 89, or the entire paragraph if I had to. But the two sentences before it and the two sentences after it are going to give you a better understanding for what the question has to do, because it gives you some context, and also it saves you a lot of time because you don't have to read the entire passage. So again, if you get a citation question, you get a question that tells you directly where to go directly there, read the two sentences before it, the two sentences after it, and then go back to the question and do the question. And remember this, not a lot of people realize this. Citation questions are given in order. So if you do a practice test or if you do the real test, it's not going to tell you for question number 1, go to line 43, and then for question number 2, go to line 12. Okay? It's not going to be a mess. It's going to go to line 1, and then go to line 2, and then go to line 3. So you understand what I'm saying? It's going to go sequential. It's going to go in order. Now, to save yourself some time, and actually a lot of time, you should do all the citation questions first, because you know exactly where to look. There's no thinking involved in here. You don't have to think about where do I go to get the answer. The citation questions are going to give you a good feel for what the passage is talking about without reading the entire passage. So just imagine for a second that it's test time right now, and you're going to take the test. And you're sitting, and your book is open to the reading section. What are you going to do? I'll go over that in the next video.